What it do, cucks? It's your boy, the Hater, up in this piece. And it's time for a new thing. This is called Hater in the Thunderstorm, cucks. Hater in the Thunderstorm. You know what I'm saying? It's that type of day. The Hater went out to smoke a cigarette. And there's a thunderstorm brewing. Who knew, right? Earlier today I went out and it was sunny and quite hot. Now it's like, not that hot and thunderstorming. Which, I don't know. I can't hate it. I like the thunderstorms. Jeez, man. So anyways, with that being said, let's get to today's video. Today's video is about the fakeness of wrestling. All right, here's how this goes, okay? Wrestling is obviously a fake sport. Everybody knows this. Now, despite wrestling being fake, there needs to be some sort of logic, and therefore there needs to be a certain level of how fake wrestling can be. You know what I mean? Like, wrestling cannot be too fake, but obviously it cannot be too real either, right? If wrestling is too real, then, like, it's boring. Then you get, like, Lou Thez and, like, George Hackenschmidt and these, like, old people that nobody's ever seen wrestle before. Even, like, Harley Race and things like that. It's like, nobody wants to see these guys. Oh, Harley Race is a real tough guy. I don't believe it. What do you think of them apples? I don't believe that he's a tough guy. I don't believe that Meng or Haku is a tough guy either. I don't give a rat's ass. What do you think of them apples? But wrestling cannot be too fake either, right? In other words, there's real, there's fake, and then there's somewhere in between. Inherently, wrestling has to be a bit cartoony, right? Wrestling has to be a bit goofy, has to be a bit silly. But the wrestlers need to be presented as human beings, and they also need to be presented within the context of the sport. The reality is, right? The reality is that there's no move that someone can do to you where you can't, put your shoulder up, right? There's no way that someone can hold you down for 3 whole seconds without you being able to move your shoulder up unless you're knocked out, right? So the understanding of wrestling as a medium, as an athletic medium, if you will, is that the person who is not kicking out either is in so much pain, right, that they're discombobulated and something is happening, right, and then they can't kick out, or it's almost like an attempt to, give up, right? It's like, I've had enough, I'm getting pinned, right? Because we all know that no matter what, you can always kick out, right? Unless someone kills you or you're unconscious, you can kick out. With that being said, it's like there's certain things that could be used to end the match more reasonably. A finishing move that implies someone is getting knocked out or anything like that, that could work. Obviously, a chair shot to the head, when they did those, that should have been an automatic win. Like, if someone hits you with a chair on the head, you have no business getting up. You know what I mean? Because it's just unreasonable that, a chair to the head, is not enough to, pin someone, but sweet chin music is. You know what I mean? It's just silly. So, there's that part of it, We have to suspend our disbelief a little bit, and, the pinfall is not meant to be logically explained, right? When someone's getting pinned, let's say with a schoolboy, they'll kick their legs in the air, implying that somehow they cannot, kick out or something, you know what I mean? But realistically, we all know they could, right? So some of that has to exist. In other words, wrestling cannot be too real. Otherwise, it's going to be boring, and at best, it's going to be something like the UFC, which, if we're being honest, the UFC is boring, right? Like boxing, the Hater loves boxing, but a lot of times boxing is boring, and boxing has no ground game either, so it's as exciting as it's going to get, but even then, it's kind of boring, right? So wrestling cannot be boring because it's a show, it's entertainment, it's not a competition, right? But this doesn't mean that wrestling needs to go all the way to the other side of the equation, as it has nowadays. Nowadays, people kick out of sweet chin musics all the time. People do the super kick better than Shawn Michaels in the sense that it looks more devastating. It doesn't look cleaner, but it looks like it hurts more when Rusev does it. You know what I mean? And for Rusev, it's like a regular move. The Young Bucks do 15 super kicks per match, and people are just kicking out left and right. In addition, part of the showmanship of wrestling involves doing crazy ass taunts and crazy ass moves. Now, this is appreciated because wrestling has to be entertaining, right? But there's really no reason for anybody to do a 630 senton. a swanton bomb works just as efficiently. So that kind of adds to the fakeness of it. But fine, you want to make it look more devastating, you want to make it look more unique, I have no problem with that. The thing that I have a problem with is when these things happen and wrestling just starts looking clearly fake. For example, I'll give you a great example. The coffin drop, right? Darby Allin's finishing move, the coffin drop, is stupid. Because it's basically a senton, from the top rope, but he jumps backwards. Like, why? You know what I mean? Why doesn't he just jump forward like a normal senton? That way he can see where the hell he's jumping, and the guy can get out of the way or cannot get out of the way. The chances are much lower that Darby Allin will miss. Just logically speaking, right? In addition, the coffin drop could be improved as a move if Darby Allin just really, really quickly climbs the turnbuckle and just falls backwards, like a trust fall, right? Where it's like, this is the most efficient way to do the move. But this is the kind of fakeness that bothers me, right? When someone is doing something that is just silly and that you wouldn't do in a fight, taken to its logical conclusion, this becomes game breaking. This becomes like unwatchable. You know what I mean? You may have noticed, as the haters fans, that there's a few things the hater really dislikes in the context of wrestling. One of those things are cinematic matches, right? And any variant of cinematic matches, depending on how you want to look at it and what you want to call it, right? The hater doesn't like any of these things because the hater finds them to be bad, finds them to be not wrestling, and finds them to be too silly and too fake to be taken seriously. I'm sure a lot of us can empathize with the following anecdote that I'm going to give. When I was small, my dad and my mom both thought that wrestling sucked, right? They both thought that it was stupid, generally speaking, right? And they couldn't get past the fact that I'm watching something that's fake. And my dad would always make fun of me because my dad's a funny guy, you know what I'm saying? He'd be like, son, why are you watching this? It's stupid, right? And I'd be like, Dad, look, let me explain to you, right? And we'd watch a match, and then he would just laugh his ass off, right? Because to him, it looked so fake, Now imagine if he saw, I haven't watched wrestling with my dad in years because he doesn't like wrestling, but imagine if I saw a Will Ospreay Ricochet match with my dad. My dad would be laughing his ass off, right? Because he'd be like, nobody would ever do this in any context other than the circus. That's what my dad always says. He's like, this is just like the circus. He's like, why don't you just watch the circus? It's more entertaining. They're better acrobats. And, and he's not wrong, right? And that's the issue that I have. The fakeness of the matches, is not even balanced correctly with the storylines. You'll have a serious storyline, and you'll have the fakest looking match ever. You know what I mean? Sami Zayn can just kick Gunther in the head one time, and that's it. That's pretty fake looking to me because Sami Zayn's a small guy, and in reality, there's no reason why Sami Zayn would be able to tolerate punishment from Gunther, but not the other way around. You know what I mean? Especially considering that Gunther was chanting for a year. So if the storyline is going to be serious, the wrestling needs to be more serious. In the Attitude Era, let's use that as an example, it was the opposite. The storylines were very comical and very not serious, and the wrestling was more grounded, right? It was more grounded in reality, in the sense that a few people did their big moves, a few people did high-flying moves, but that was their thing. You know what I mean? Now everybody, the entire LWO, does the Canadian Destroyer. Rey Mysterio does the Canadian Destroyer. Everybody's doing these same moves and creating the same matches and the same problems as a consequence, right? And that's not something that I think anybody really wants, right? In fact, I think the opposite is true. I think most people don't want this. I think most people want wrestling to be a bit more believable, right? The believability can take many forms, The most important one is some sort of taking into consideration the size of wrestlers, right? So for example, there's no scenario in which Liv Morgan and Dominic Mysterio at the pay-per-view should ever have an upper hand on Damian Priest and Rhea Ripley, unless it's at the very end and they win the match using this, right? There's no scenario in which Dominic should be stomping on Damian Priest because Damian Priest is 5 times his size. You know what I mean? So that makes it look fake. In addition, kicking out of big moves all the time makes it look fake. especially if like someone kicks out of 19 big moves, and then they get like a backslide, and then they can't kick out. You know, that's just silly. It's like you just kicked out of a chair shot to the dome, but you can't kick out of a small package. You know. Anyways, there's many different ways in which wrestling can be made to look more real. The only thing that matters though is that the fans can connect with it. Wrestling should never look obviously fake, you know? Like, and the standard should be this. If a child watches it, the child should think, oh, this is real. I'll never forget it. I was a kid and I was watching wrestling with some of my friends and their cousin was in town. And she was younger. She was like 2 years younger than me. I was probably in 3rd or 4th grade, so she must have been in 2nd grade. Or maybe she was in 3rd grade. And she'd never seen wrestling before. But when she saw it, she thought it was real, right? Because she's like, how can this be fake? Like this woman's pulling this woman from the hair. I'll never forget it. It was like some backstage brawl. But she was a kid. If she saw it now, she's like smart. She's like an architect now or some shit, right? Like she'd be like, oh, no, this is dumb. But back then, she may have reasonably thought, oh, this is real, right? Because it was presented as somewhat real. Nowadays, I'm pretty sure if a 1st grader watches wrestling, they'll be like, oh, this is clearly fake because how did someone kick out of this, right? And all you need to know is like, you know, like if you've ever taken a punch to the face, like most people haven't, and I understand that, but if you take a punch to the face, you know that like you can't take many of those, right? But in wrestling, it's like Stone Cold just punches the guy in the face like 8 times, you know, and then the guy's still standing. In real life, if you punch someone 8 times in the face, it's done. That person's knocked out, cold, motherfuckers. Unless, of course, you're not trying to hurt them, you know? But the implication is that in wrestling, they are trying to hurt them, right? Even like an open fist punch. Like an open, like, you know, watch Power Slap, right? Like people slap each other and knock each other out. So there you have it. The point is, wrestling, I'm not expecting it to be like, you know, UFC and to have it be like too much of a shoot, because that's boring. But it has to be believable. It has to be believable to a 3rd grader. You know, otherwise it's just goofy. You know, it's like, and also, this is how you protect characters. If Shawn Michaels can kick out of a tombstone, that's because he's Shawn Michaels. Likewise, if Undertaker kicks out of a Sweet Chin Music, it's because he's the Undertaker, player. But if like Will Ospreay, like eventually someone's gonna kick out of the Tiger Driver 91, right? Like nobody should be able to kick out of that move, especially because it's presented the way it is, you know? But here we are. So that being said, I think wrestling would benefit tremendously from a more serious outlook. So take care of yourselves, cuts, and I'll see y'all tomorrow.